So, when you have a conflict, it's important to use your conflict resolution skills. And that would, of course, be using your communication skills, which is what we talked about before actively listening, giving feedback, making sure that the person knows that you are listening to them. It's good to use assertive communication. We're going to talk what that means. We don't want to be aggressive with it, but we do want to stand up for ourselves. Negotiation is very important. So, what you want to do is you want to try to identify what is the cause of the conflict, what do people both actually want, and negotiation involves giving a little bit, right? That's compromise, but then getting something that you find acceptable. So, in the most simplistic terms, let's think about you with your parents, right? Your parents want something for you. Maybe they want you to get a good night's sleep. So they're saying you need to go to bed at 8 o'clock sharp. And you're like, I kind of want to go to bed at 12 o'clock. So then maybe you meet in the middle and 10 o'clock becomes your new one. I don't know. Maybe it's different. Maybe they want you to go to bed at 8, you say 10, and then you compromise at 9. Whatever is appropriate for a thing, you get the idea. You kind of like meet in the middle. Maybe if the parents or somebody else is holding more of the cards, they really get to decide. Maybe you lean more towards them, but you're still able to get a little bit, something better than what you had before, perhaps. And that's the idea behind compromising and negotiating. So, do some critical thinking right now. What are some examples of positive and negative peer pressure? So, peer pressure is feeling pressure to participate in something, but it could be something positive. For example, if you had a community service opportunity and you knew you needed some community service hours, but you really didn't feel like waking up, and your friends are saying, come on, just come with us. You need the hours anyway, blah, 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 blah. They're making some good points. You didn't want to go, but you decide to go. I mean, ultimately, you are doing something good for the community, and it could be something good for you too. So you could be encouraged to go to a study group with friends, to study harder with friends, to go and play basketball with friends when you were feeling kind of lazy that day. Whatever it is, all of those things are good for you, and it's good for your health. So that's actually positive peer pressure. You can have positive peer pressure. A lot of people don't realize that. Of course, there's obviously negative peer pressure. I think people really focus on the most. Feeling pressure to drink alcohol or do drugs or to not go to school or to tease or something like that. I think we all are a little bit more familiar with that, but positive examples can exist as well. Let's go over some of the basics of communication. It doesn't always matter so much what you say as matter how you say it. So your communication style is a set of behaviors and methods of relaying information that has an impact on all of your different facets or parts of your life. The goal is to be understood, not always to be right. That's a key thing right over here. You don't like, is it important enough for you to win the argument if you lose a friend or you, all of a sudden have an irreparable or big hole or an ongoing issue with somebody? As long as you're both trying to understand each other. There's so many times where miscommunication is at the basis of everything. You think that they want this, but really when you talk to them, you're like, oh, all they want is this. That's actually something I don't care as much about. And really, hammering down, figuring out what the other person wants and what you want is really important. So try to get the facts before you pass judgment on something. I feel like this happens all the time. I can't think of a specific example, but there's been so many issues where you hear something, right, secondhand from someone. And they say, oh, so-and-so wants this. And you're like, what? How could they want that? That's ridiculous. How could anyone want that? Doesn't even make sense. And when you're saying that, it doesn't even make sense. There's probably a good chance it doesn't make sense. When you actually go and talk to the person, you realize it's always a little bit more complicated than what you originally thought. So if you kind of step back a little bit and try to see it from their perspective, it might start to make some sense of it. But when you're hearing it, through secondhand, third hand, sometimes it may sound completely outrageous because that's through the lens of the person telling you that. Learning all communication styles is important in order to avoid communicating in less effective ways and in order to recognize those styles in others, so to be able to deal with them. There are 3 types of communication. Those would be passive, aggressive, and assertive. So please make sure that you write these 3 down. Pause if you need to. I'm going to move right along to the next part. Passive is allowing our own rights to be violated by failing to express our honest feelings. The goal of being a passive communicator is to avoid conflict no matter what. There may be certain cases where this is absolutely important. If you fear for your safety or you just know that there is no change in the other person at all, sometimes you just want to get through the situation, and that involves you be more passive in that manner. There's very little risk involved in this one. This is a safer bet. A lot of times people that are passive will show little eye contact. They'll often just defer to other people's opinions. Sometimes they'll talk in a more quieter tone. They're not going to speak up too much. They may suddenly, though, explode if they wind up being passive for too long. I mean, like explode with anger or kind of lash out. So you want to be careful. Just because somebody is acting passive, that doesn't always necessarily mean that they want to or they don't want to talk. They just may not feel that they have the opportunity to, or they may not feel powerful enough or confident enough to do so. So, like, here's a silly comment. Are you assertive? What do you think? Obviously, that person is not if they're asking that on the other side. So you're going to look for verbal cues. These are the types of things that somebody's passive saying, oh, I don't know. Whatever you think is fine. You have more experience than I. You can decide. I'll go with whatever the group decides. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Now, again, sometimes these things are the right thing to say. You have to realize that, right? If somebody else truly cares a lot more and you don't care at all, and you're like, well, if I give on this one, maybe I can get something I want later. That could be strategic. That could be smart. That would make sense if it truly doesn't matter to you. But if it does matter to you and you're just saying it doesn't because you want to avoid conflict, that is the type of thing that may not be good over the long term. So again, this might sound very respectful, but the other person might respect you even more if you if you speak up a little bit and show your mind. There's a classic example of couples arguing where one person says, what do you want to eat? And the other person says, I don't know. What do you want to eat? And then, then it just becomes like a classic argument. No, I asked you first. No, you have to pick. Because both people are basically being passive in that one. They want the other person to pick. And that could just be a silly example, but it can turn into a real conflict with bigger, more important things if neither of them are speaking and kind of making a decision and taking charge of the situation. So here are some of the effects of being passive. It could lead to the person giving up on being him or herself. Kind of builds dependency relationships, like you're dependent on somebody else to make the big decisions. Doesn't really know where he or she stands. Kind of slowly loses self-esteem, because you don't really think that your own opinions are important enough. It promotes other causes instead of your own, and could sometimes lead to somebody not being well liked. Of course, this is not always the case, right? These are just generalizations. Sometimes, if somebody is being passive, other people might respond to that, certainly more than being aggressive in other cases, right? You probably would rather be passive and you're not being argumentative. But again, it can be an attractive quality to people if you do assert for yourself, like saying, well, this is what I think, in a respectful way. So then there's aggressive. This is protecting one's own rights at the expense of others' rights, and there's no exceptions. The goal of the aggressor is to win at all costs, to be right. Doesn't really consider the actions a risk because this person thinks they will always get their way. And I'm sure you can think of some people in this situation where they just seem like they always have to be right. And sometimes it could be over the most minor thing that doesn't really seem to matter in the long run. So in this case, the eye contact can be very angry and intimidating. Lots of energy. They could be loud, over talking the other person, never defers to other, and or doesn't admit that they are. They could be manipulative. They could be controlling. Oftentimes, this can be used in conjunction with violence or sometimes verbal abuse, where you're belittling other people, putting them down. That would be the case of verbal abuse. So here are just some now, it's not going to be the exact phrases. You might be like, nobody says this. But these are the types of, if it's not the text what they say, it could be the subtext. It's kind of like what they mean underneath what they say. So here might be something you might hear. I don't know why you can't see that this is the right way to do it. Again, that leaves no opportunity to see the other person's viewpoint. It's going to be my way or not at all. And again, nobody probably says exactly like that, but that could be what they're implying with what they're saying. You're just stupid if you think that that will work. So again, it's putting that idea. Again, there's other ways to say it, which are a little bit kinder, but kind of put the same way across. Don't ask me why, just do it. Who cares what you feel? We're talking about making things work here. So all of these are phrases that are pretty aggressive and really not giving the opportunity for the other person to be correct at all. Then there's passive aggressive. That's kind of like a mixture of the two things. This is forfeiting your own rights initially, but followed by some sort of manipulation or vengeance later. The goal of this style is to avoid conflict, but then make the other party wish that they had seen it your way. I think we can all sympathize with that idea. We probably all wanted to get some sort of revenge on another one, maybe in just a kinder way, and just saying, they're going to realize that they were wrong later. So it avoids the risk initially, and it does risk relationships later. And then people sometimes then act surprised when people are mad about that. So it behaves passively to somebody's face, but then aggressively when they are not around. So sarcasm would be a way to do that. And I'm not saying that sarcasm is necessarily always wrong. I think it's important when the other person realizes you're doing it, and you're doing it in a playful, fun, hopefully harmless way. But if you're always doing it if your intentions are to hurt the other person, I think that's where you can run into trouble. So again, all of these could sometimes be silly examples right here, but this would be passive aggressive. I love your hair. Most people probably can't even tell it's a wig. This is an example of what's called a backhanded compliment, right? You're saying something that sounds good on paper, but really there's this kind of sinister undertone right over there. I hear what you're saying, and I wouldn't want to make waves, so I'll do what you say, even though somebody will probably get sued. So right over there, it's just basically saying we're going to give in to you, but if we're wrong, it's all on you, right? To your face, sure, I will do that behind your back. I'm not going to do that. And then I was only joking. Why are you getting so upset? Now, I'm sure you've heard something like this, right? That's definitely a passive aggressive thing. I was only joking. And then it's making the other person seem almost crazy for getting upset when perhaps they weren't joking in the first place. And then the whole fine, whatever, I'll do it, right? It's saying you're saying it's fine. You're saying whatever, meaning you don't care, but really you do care. And your words are saying one thing, but your actions are saying another. And then last thing is you just want everything to be perfect. So again, a very sarcastic remark. Now, right over here, this is, I don't know if you could tell, it's bad quality image right over here, but this is a passive aggressive thing that this person did. They said, we waited 30 minutes and got no service right here. What they did was they made a huge mess. I mean, this is unacceptable to just leave all this. Is it unacceptable to get the service? Sure, that's fine. But there's ways to go about it without having to leave a huge mess for the person, because you never know what that person is going through. You're not seeing it from their perspective. Perhaps it's the first day on the job. Perhaps they're absolutely slammed and it's a holiday. Perhaps, somebody, they had a serious issue in their life and all of a sudden they left their post and you don't know what's going on. So again, you just want to try to have some empathy for the other person. This is certainly not that case right there. All right, assertive is protecting your own rights without violating the rights of others. This is where we're trying to get to right here. The goal of the assertive person is to communicate with respect, to understand each other, to find a solution. You take a risk with others in the short run, but in the long run, the relationships are much stronger. So again, the risk is kind of standing up for yourself about what you believe in. You're trying not to have the other person be upset with you, or to be to be upset, and to just, you don't want the other person to think that you're coming off as aggressive, right? And they might, when you're being assertive, they might think that you're being aggressive, but they'll probably respect you in the long term for voicing your opinion. So in this case, you definitely want to maintain eye contact. You want to listen, validate other people's opinions, but be confident, be strong, and flexible, objective and unemotional as much as possible, right? This is the right thing, this is not what I feel, and present your wishes clearly and respectfully. So what you're saying is, that's a way to kind of rephrase what the other person is, to make them feel like you heard them. So that's a good thing to say right there. Another one is, I can see that this is important to you, but it's also important to me. So perhaps we can talk more respectfully and just try to come to a solution to the problem right here. Next is, this is what I think, this is what I feel like. I believe that you're saying what you think, right? Clearly and assertively. And you would say things like, I would appreciate if you, and then notice the way I said that, I would really appreciate if you could do this for me. It means a lot to me. That's different than if you kind of come in with this tone. It's like, I would appreciate if you, right? You see how there's that sarcastic tone in the second thing. You're saying the same words. It's all about how you say and how you're perceived, though, because you don't want people to think that you're being disingenuous. So when is aggression appropriate? Obviously, in an emergency, go call 911, blah, 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 something like that. That's needed right there. When there is no time to spend on a compromise right there, if there's like a life-threatening situation, when your opinion is based on several facts and therefore you are right, and there is not time to utilize the assertiveness skills, there are examples where aggression might be appropriate. Passive. It's okay to be passive when the results of pushing the issue would cause problems that outweigh the benefits. When the issues are very minor, when there is a power differential that is not in your favor and the other party is getting agitated by your assertiveness. So, again, in this case, it might be with a teacher, it might be with somebody that's older, it might be with a parent. There's certain cases where you're just going to have to be passive in that moment. And then perhaps maybe when the person is, maybe you're talking with somebody that's being very emotional at the moment, maybe they need time to calm down. And then you could be passive now, but when they have calmed down, you can go and talk to them when they're a little bit more level headed. And then you can talk about how, you didn't really appreciate that time, but then that might be your time to be assertive. And when the other's position is impossible to change. So, for example, if you're talking to a police officer, even if you think that they are being unfair in that moment, they have a lot of position of power over you. You don't want to get somebody upset in that moment. That could make your night or your possibly life a lot more difficult. Now, assertive. What is okay in assertive behavior? It's okay to say that I don't know. It's okay to say that, no, I'm sorry, I cannot do that, and explain it. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you take responsibility for them. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to tell somebody that you disagree with them. You want to do it in a way that is respectful. A lot of times, if you say automatically, somebody says, I believe this, and you're like, no, I don't think that. That could come off as rude. But if you're like, I like the way you said that. However, I think I still believe that this is going to be the case. You're validating somebody else, but then you're still sticking up for your own opinion. It's okay to challenge other people's opinions or actions, but this is where we come up with the idea of constructive criticism. It's okay to not accept another's opinion, right? Getting criticized. It's okay to say, I hear what you're saying. I still think that what my original thought was correct. And it's okay to ask for a change in behavior if somebody else is being inappropriate. So let's take a quick summary. Passive is when you step on me. Assertive is both are protected, and aggressive is when I step on you. That's just to summarize. So every time we decide to communicate with another person, you're selecting a style of communication. So try to notice yours and try to notice other people's. And being assertive is not synonymous or the same thing as with an anger management problem. It is protecting your rights without violating other people. It's walking that middle ground right over here. And that's the ideal version of what you'd like to do. So get all the facts before you pass judgment. Assertiveness allows you to face confrontation in a healthy way and without getting too emotional about it. I think it comes with time, right? You get better and better and better about this and not letting your emotions take over. And it's okay if your emotions do kind of take over. It's always good to come back to that person later and explain that you were being a little overly emotional and now you've had time to reconsider. So this is interesting. People are not difficult. They only seem difficult to the extent that we do not have the skills to deal with what they bring to the table. It's our lack of knowledge that makes a situation difficult, right? And getting to the heart of what both people want, when both people are saying, is so important in resolving conflicts with people going forward. So again, just another quick little summary right over here. I win, you win is the assertive part. I care about myself. I care about you. Aggressiveness is I win, you lose. Now, this is an interesting one. Passive aggressive is I lose and you lose. And then the last one is just being passive is I lose, you win. So you could see that they all have their pluses and minuses, but the best one is going to be right over here, being assertive. And we already talked about this. So, yeah, that's it. Hopefully this made a lot of sense to you and it was useful for you. Thank you.